we have sort of 5 broad questions that we have come up with based on questions that the group has asked, plus we looked at things that have been important to you over the last few years. So to start with, let's start with transitional justice and accountability sort of issues. So given the upcoming elections and the ongoing calls for transitional justice, what concrete steps do you believe the next government must take to ensure accountability for wartime atrocities and human rights violations? And also, how can these steps be realistically implemented under the current political climate? We hear various things from various parties, especially now that elections are looming. Of course, we don't need to look at everything from an election perspective. We will go through the questions because we do have a question at the end about elections. Do you believe reconciliation and acknowledgement is sufficient, or do we need something more robust that includes accountability and consequences?
See, ascertainment of the truth is primary. We've always said that. It is said that truth is the first casualty in war. Okay. So you need to find the truth.
And
exactly. And during elections as well, yes. That's, I think, crucial to genuine reconciliation. For people to be satisfied that what they went through, those difficult times, their losses, that all of that is acknowledged as actually having happened.
Right.
You know, if the state or anyone else denies it, then that will not lead to reconciliation. So, ascertainment of the truth is primary. Once the truth is ascertained and acknowledged by all sections as to, well, this is in fact what happened, thereafter I think the communities can decide how to go forward. I will not say that people will abandon their quest for justice, for punishment, etc. But the experience of the world has been that once there is acknowledgement, the drive for what we might call revenge goes away. Right. And in war, as has happened here as well, there are excesses by all sides. The degrees might vary, but nevertheless there are excesses by all sides. So once all that comes out and all sections acknowledge, I think the mood will change from one of revenge and a drive for punishment-based sort of remedies to something different. It will not entirely be like that.
Yeah.
There will be calls for, meting out punishments, and some cases that will be quite justified. But what I'm saying is we will not know until we go through that process of genuinely looking at what actually happened. Once that comes out, thereafter we may be able to look at what reconciliation will look like.
Right. So even the right to mourn the dead has been a problem, right? Why do you think that is? I mean, this has been successive governments, including this administration.
So this is part of the denial by the state that certain things happened, right? People died. Of course, the next of kin know that somebody died. Right. So they have a right to mourn. Yeah. So there is no point denying that. But there is this fear in the back of the mind that if you do allow large-scale sort of community-wise mourning ceremonies, etc., that the state somehow acknowledges that there has been mass killings. Mm-hmm. So that fear stops them from allowing these things to happen. But then it exacerbates it. Yeah. Because then the victims, those who are left behind, they feel that their basic right to mourn their dead is not being permitted, etc. So the gap continues to widen. Although the physical fighting has stopped 15 years ago, the gap keeps widening. Yeah. The moment you start stopping people from grieving, remembering, and things like that.
Right. So, I mean, even the UNHCR sessions continuously
They underscore that the importance of memorialization,
but there has never been any sort of repercussions, right? I mean, for the government as a result of the UNHCR.
Well, the instrument of the UN Human Rights Council is just that it can only be a pressure body, because it can't pass any binding resolution. In the UN system, it's only the Security Council that can pass binding resolutions.
Right.
So these have very different sort of impact. So unless a country concerned agrees and adopts those recommendations, you can't impose it.
Right.
Of course, in 2015, Sri Lanka co-sponsored that resolution, HRC 30/1. And if that process had gone on, then we may have seen some progress. But then, after having co-sponsored the entire resolution, at some point later they resigned from that and said, we are withdrawing our co-sponsorship.
I think that was after
the change of government. Yeah, yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, so we have been here for 305 days. The mothers of the disappeared have been doing it for
2,000, 2,500,
something days. I mean, we can only imagine the effort and the pain that they are going through. What would a process of reconciliation look like to you?
So that's a good example of the disappeared, because not knowing what has happened is a greater pain than even coping with the loss or a dead person.
There's no closure, no?
There's no closure. You keep, because naturally in the human self there's always hope, and they keep thinking maybe he or she is alive somewhere. So that the closure is an important thing, and that can happen only through a process through which the truth is ascertained again. So if a mother had handed over her son to the security forces at the time they crossed, then she is entitled to know from those who took charge of her son what they did with him. The information can't just disappear. There are people who know what happened, and that has to come out.
Right.
I suppose you need like a South Africa type Truth and Reconciliation Commission, a proper one.
Yeah, proper one. Well, there are many criticisms of the South African model, but it still served a purpose. I've seen, I have a small booklet written by Archbishop Desmond Tutu titled No Future Without Forgiveness. And he makes a stupendous claim there through the TRC process. He was the chairman of the TRC. He says whenever a person who was responsible made total disclosure, full disclosure, the families of the victim said, we forgive. But if he held anything back, they did not forgive. He says 100% of the time, when there was total disclosure, they said, we forgive. And only thing they wanted was, show us where the bones are. And they would exhume and do a proper burial again.
Right. We've had a couple of mass graves been excavated over the last couple of months. Gets very little media coverage and so on. So what you're saying is acknowledgement is the first step.
First thing.
So we haven't even taken that first step. So I think
it's called TRC and TR whatever else, and the T is the first letter in every one of those, which is truth. So that's the first pillar in any reconciliation process.
Right. I mean, we do have a military that is still as mighty as it was when the war came to an end, or even mightier. Do you think that is an issue in this whole thing? I mean, do you feel
I think political leadership,
the military in some way by acknowledging this?
No, I don't think so. I think political leadership is vital for this whole thing. I remember when President Maithripala Sirisena became president, at least in the initial stages, he gave leadership to that kind of narrative. He called it a cruel war. He said, some people having behaved badly have brought disrepute to the whole army. So those have to be looked into. I didn't see any repercussions, any adverse reactions to those. So if it is communicated to the people properly, and the value of reconciliation, value of ascertaining the truth, value of coming clean with everything. Surely both sides committed atrocities.
Yeah.
Now I have said this and I have been, copying a lot of hate from my own community. But that's the truth. They also know that that's the truth.
Well, we cop a lot of hate, pointing out that government can't behave like a.
So, but then you have to come out of that.
Organization.
If you want to stay in that comfort zone of your community, sort of being happy with you for not saying anything bad about your community, there can never be reconciliation.
Right. I mean, ultimately, right now we are seeing, Israel-Palestine issue and all of that. Our stance is that the government can't behave like a terrorist organization.
Exactly.
There has to be a different standard that they're held to. So let's hope like some sort of sanity. You have a question.
That OMP was also during that did some good work.
They started and they got to a particular point and then they starved them of funds.
Okay.
All right.
So, I mean, there's a quote from you, the cries for justice cannot be ignored. Transitional justice is not just about the past, it's about building a future where such atrocities are never repeated.
Yeah.
You remember saying that, right?
Yes, I remember.
That's a quote from you directly. Okay.
I must say something there. You see, what I learned in South Africa, I've made about 4 or 5 trips there and gone through all these sort of check. They have advised us, they said, secure your future before you look at your past.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why in the last government we tried to make a new constitution, a new start, right? Because once communities feel that their future is secure, that all of this happened because they wanted to get to say equality, equal citizenship right, whatever, access to governance, all of that, and once that is secure, then look back at your past and then you wonder, okay, what shall we do with these issues? Yeah. It's easier to deal with them then, rather than if all of those futuristic, problems still remain.
Right. Just one question off the script. The diaspora sometimes still sort of glorifies the LTTE and all that. Is there an impediment as well?
See, when you say diaspora, that's a wrong depiction of
not everybody.
Very small minority. I would even put them below 5%, but they occupy about 99% of the sound space.
That's what happens.
So
they're a minority and a minority.
So because they do that, it sort of looms large and looks as though they are the ones who are, But you must also understand the fact that a lot of them, even the others who are silent, some of them have those sentiments because they went out of this country, say, in July 83.
Yeah.
So their last memory of this country is running away from their houses that were burning.
Yeah.
So we have moved on, but their last memory is still that. So this is a problem with all diaspora.
Right. I mean, 83 is almost erased from our history books. It's barely talked about. It's not even enough.
For those of us who lived in Colombo during that time and all that, for us it's like AD and BC. We talk to people, when we talk to it's pre-83, post-83.
Right. Okay, so moving on from that, one of the solutions that have been offered has been the 13th Amendment and the question of devolution of power. So you have been a staunch advocate for full implementation of the 13th Amendment, right? And
well, as a stepping stone, 13th Amendment itself is not a proper meaningful scheme of devolution, because you give it with one hand and you take it with the other. That's been our experience.
Can you demystify what the 13th Amendment is just a little bit for us?
Yeah, well, it's within what you call a unitary state structure.
Right.
A unitary state essentially means one legislature.
Yeah.
Britain has that model. So you can give powers to peripheries to govern themselves, etc. But you can also take it back.
Yeah.
So the culture in other countries now, India for instance, give back. Only once now they've taken back powers from Kashmir. But until then, they've never taken back. They've only given more. Right. Whenever there was claim for separation for various states, they've negotiated by giving more powers.
Yeah.
But here, it's kind of a culture where the central government is very strong, and they've been taking back powers in so many different ways. laws have been passed, Divi Naguma being the prime example of that. 15 powers of the provincial councils were taken away. We couldn't stop it because it's unitary structure. Even if the provincial council disagrees, you can pass it with the 2/3 majority and
remove it.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, 13th is the law of the land.
That's the law of the land. But even that has not been fully implemented.
Yeah.
So that is why we do it in stages. Now, this whole idea of 13 plus that Mahinda Rajapaksa spoke about is actually, there is a particular phrase. There were 3 joint statements he issued with India. It said, full implementation of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution and building upon it so as to achieve meaningful devolution. Right? So by then he was conceding that there is no full implementation. 13th Amendment hasn't been fully implemented yet.
Right.
Second, he was conceding that even that is not meaningful devolution.
Right.
Need to go
So
further.
it has to be meaningful. So you have to do something more. What is given ought not be taken back unilaterally.
Yeah. So I think the sticking point has been police powers mainly.
No, police powers is one subject.
Yeah.
What I am saying is even other powers that have been given ought not be taken back without the consent of the provincial council. So,
Right
but that
now,
has happened.
we don't even have a provincial council right now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that has happened over a period of time, not only by the passage of laws. See, I'll give you an example. Education and health are supposed to be fully devolved.
Right.
So they remain devolved on paper. But what does the centre do? It categorizes some schools as national schools. It categorizes some hospitals as national hospitals. And they're taken back to the...
So that comes under the... Yeah.
So administratively also this has happened.
So in terms of addressing sort of Tamil, minority community grievances and looking at sort of full national reconciliation, what needs to happen beyond the 30%?
So it's very simple. You have the structure of a provincial council. So that's all right for the moment. You have powers devolved to it. Some powers already devolved have not been implemented.
Yeah.
Those must be implemented.
Right.
And you must ensure that what is devolved is not taken back. That's all.
And that's a start. You said the 13th Amendment is the minimum. It is the bedrock upon which true reconciliation in united Sri Lanka can be built.
Okay.
Right.
So that's minimum meaning. That's the devolution of powers. The additional step is that you don't take back.
You don't take it back, and then those powers are given, guaranteed.
And there are a few other things like the governor's powers, etc. See, you have an elected body, and then you have a governor appointed by the president. He exercises executive power. Then why do you have an elected body?
Well, I mean,
so then the centre through the governor is actually governing the province as well.
Right.
Legislative power is supposed to be devolved on those subjects to the provincial councils.
Yeah.
But the governor has right of, or rather, you have to have his assent to every law that is passed by the provincial council. So you have a strict control from here.
The big brother, the
so there are few.
sitting there.
But what I'm saying is the structure is there, right? How you work these things must be in a meaningful way.
Right.
That the people must actually have powers of governance in their hands.
So how much of an impediment to all of this is the continued presence of the military in the northeast? Has that now been scaled back?
It's scaled back a lot, but they're still occupying land. I mean, they don't get involved in civilian affairs very much now. There are certain areas, but much reduced. But they still occupy a lot of the land. And so those lands are not able to be released to the people to get back. And
land rights, of course, is another issue.
Yeah.
But has there ever been a rationale given why, like after now?
They say national security, we require this for national security.
So national security is like a big blanket that
that's right. So then nobody can question that. We are not experts.
National security and
they are the only experts.
Okay. All right. So moving on from that. You've been involved in some sort of public interest litigation. You've been against, we've had so many sort of laws enacted over the last few years, like the PTA, the Bureau of Rehabilitation, and some of these laws you fought against. And also, you've been very vocal on the visa system. In fact, you were part of the.
I'm a petitioner.
You were a petitioner in that. But we also petitioners.
The associations.
Association, yeah, we were petitioners in that too. So, how do you view all of it in terms of sort of governance and rule of law in Sri Lanka? Like, why do we have to keep running to the courts to get these issues addressed?
Yeah, because corruption has become part and parcel of our day-to-day life in this country, and a lot of people don't think twice about it. It's systemic, so it's sort of reached a proportion that I seriously doubt that it can be eradicated completely by formal means.
Formal means, yeah. So it's a generational.
So
project.
by formal means I mean, see, removal of a president. There are formal means.
Yeah.
You can bring a impeachment motion, etc. But that's not how the last president was removed.
People had to.
So that was informal means.
Yeah.
So we might have to resort to informal means to eradicate corruption.
Well, yeah, I mean, now people make the argument, you all got rid of a constitutionally elected president by, agitating, and that argument is always made, right? That,
Yeah, so corruption is it's a pandemic in here, because it's not just the politicians who are corrupt. See, right down the line, the public service is corrupt.
Yeah.
People are corrupt. That's where you start. Right? People who complain about corruption are generally ones who get work done by giving a bribe.
That is true.
So until that changes, it's going to be very difficult to root out corruption.
So systemically, what do you see can be done?
No, systemically, well, pragmatically, I think going after people who have stolen assets and all that is running after a rainbow. I think as a country we need to set a date and say, running after a rainbow. This date onwards, no corruption.
Yeah.
Let's, like a red line, draw a red line and say, what has happened, let it be. But from now on, no corruption.
But will it work with the mindset of our people? If you don't bring
I'm not saying just that statement won't do. So you'll have to do advocacy, you have to bring whatever and all of that kind of thing, and then say, all right, don't spend time and waste time trying to run after fellows who have, stolen. Maybe one or two you can just do something, serious cases.
But don't you think the fact that there's no accountability for anything that has happened in the past also kind of drives that impunity? Like there's no reason.
But if you set a date and you say, and then you implement it really hard, then people get the message. From that day, anything, the zero tolerance thing, if it is actually implemented, within days people will understand what that means.
So this new anti-corruption law is sort of like that. I mean, there's it's not really retroactive unless there has been like presidential commissions or commissions of inquiry. Those things can come forward, but we see that anything that's been filed, all those cases get rejected because some technicality,
some technicality
and so on. So, do you subscribe to an independent prosecuting authority?
Of course, yes. That's one of the big issues. So there has to be a totally independent public prosecutor. Attorney General, who is the chief law officer of the state and the chief law advisor to the state, has a huge conflict of interest if he is to go after people who've been in office and robbing the state.
Well, now this VFS case, the visa matter, I mean,
that's a good example. The Attorney General should have told them, I can't defend you.
Right. But these now these agreements, they are signed off at cabinet level. Don't they get some scrutiny by the Aegis Department?
So as we pointed out in court, the Attorney General vetted it apparently. but he has put a disclaimer saying we only looked at the main contract. We didn't look at the annexes.
Right.
The main contract says all annexes form part of the contract.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, what kind of Attorney General is he?
Right. So now on top of that, now we see that the old system has not been reinstated. Now, despite
So they're blatantly violating,
right?
blatantly violating court order, despite the Mobitel writing and telling them that they're ready to implement it. So what to do? Wheels of justice grind slowly but extremely small. We'll have to grind it to a powder.
Right. Well, I mean,
grinding to a halt at the moment, but it's
right. But this defiance of the judiciary, I mean, isn't that dangerous precedent?
It's very dangerous. Very dangerous. There's a question also with regard to the local government elections. Judiciary also waited till now.
Yeah.
And delivered this order.
Right.
When it was possible to have done that
2 years,
years ago.
Right, exactly. But, well, we watched this documentary the other day, Odamapati, about the forced cremations.
Yeah, I appeared in that matter.
Yes.
We managed to split the bench. One person, one judge dissented, but two dismissed it. That was a pathetic performance by the judiciary.
Right. Yeah, because we don't really need to go into that too much, but I mean,
so I'm ready to say it publicly.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So, no, I mean, it was jarring for us to...
It was dismissed.
Because, I mean, I think at the time none of us followed it so closely, but watching the movie and all the facts laid out so clearly, I'm not sure whether it was laid out entirely accurately, but it was laid out clearly that, you know, this was an issue. So, but in recent times there have been some pro-people judgments. Are you encouraged by that?
Started off with IGP.
Yeah.
And the case with Duminda was returned into jail.
No, I'm not complaining about the judiciary. I think that's the last bastion for protection of people's rights, and our judiciary has relatively been doing that job fairly satisfactorily in recent times.
Right. So things like the PTA and the Bureau of Repair, they are law now, right? I mean, they are
PTA law. Still remains...
ATA. They brought in a version which is law now, isn't it?
Yeah. Not much different. So we're not very happy with that.
Yeah.
Our position is that you don't need a special law. Right? All those special provisions can be brought in within 24 hours through the emergency regulations. Should an emergency situation arise, you can proclaim emergency, regulations can be made by the President. You don't even have to make law in Parliament. Right? All those provisions are there in the Public Security Ordinance. So we don't think you need a permanent law in our statute books, such as the Anti-Terrorism Act.
Right. I mean, these laws are just silently sitting there until they are misused.
Yeah,
right?
they're
used. The ICCPR, which I think has been...
It was for
misused.
It was for the opposite intent, but it's being used. So that's why some of these laws have to be looked at very, very carefully.
And that OSB is a nightmare.
Yeah, that's the other one.
OSB, we actually had a whole program on that.
Right.
I mean, that is very scary when you look at it. That is like sort of Big Brother
and the
to another level.
reach goes back to Kingdom Come, no?
Yeah. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. So, moving on to the abolition of the executive presidency, we see the executive sort of bleeding into the legislative and defying the judiciary, even the power of the purse, which should be with Parliament, with the legislature, is now sitting with the president. Now, right now is tourism. And, I mean, so, this presidency was actually created. This is the most powerful version of the presidency, if I'm not mistaken, right? Created for a Rajapaksa, I suppose, but now wielded like a hammer by the current president. I mean, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? I mean, we see that, over the last few months. Before the elections were declared, anybody asking for a pay rise was water cannon and tear gas and all that, and suddenly pay rise pay rises and
Given to even those who are not asking.
right? Exactly. So you have consistently advocated for the abolition of the executive presidency, right?
Yeah.
Arguing that it is a root cause for many governance issues in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Like, how do you view the presidency now? And do you feel like it's more urgent now than ever to
Yeah, I think that urgency hasn't reduced at all. Even during the economic crisis, I held on to the view that the executive presidency was a bad idea. That we could have achieved far more in terms of even recovery from the economic crisis if there was a parliamentary form of governance. So executive presidency must be abolished. That is one of the crucial reforms that must be made.
Right.
President, once he sits in that office, cannot be removed except by an impeachment process.
Two-thirds.
Two-thirds in parliament, all of that. It's very, very difficult process. Whereas a prime minister depends on parliamentary majority every day to be prime minister.
And then that can change.
If he loses
the majority.
Yeah, so the MPs in parliament are, generally will be very sensitive to what's on the ground, right? So, Prime Minister losing majority in Parliament can happen.
Yeah. People talked about the utility of the executive presidency during the war. This was necessary because we were.
I don't think even that can be justified.
But they're using the same justification, saying he dealt with the economic crisis. Right. Of course, an executive presidency created the crisis as well.
Yes,
That is
an executive presidency created the war.
Yeah.
An executive presidency created the economic crisis.
Right.
So what is there to say that they've needed to recover from?
Right. I think we famously forget the past, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's another case of that. But what do you see as the practical steps to getting rid of the presidency once and for all? I mean, right now we have an election coming. I think we have to get political at this stage. Both the main opposition candidates have committed to this. Do you think that they will see it through, or is it's too alluring for them once you sit in that seat?
Yeah, once you sit in that seat, I think it will be very difficult for anybody to want to abolish that position. But given the fact that both NPP and SJB in this parliament itself brought bills to abolish executive presidency, they themselves brought constitutional amendments. And now during election campaign, both have said that also. It's up to us, the citizens, to hold them to their word.
Right, exactly. This is the thing. So, because we saw the Aragal with the president exiting as an opportunity at that moment.
So that's what happened. You see, all this talk about no one else was willing to take responsibility, and the current president went and took it. That's a misrepresentation, because there was a consensus among all political parties at that stage for the national program, as it was called, that was designed by the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. The document was shared and everybody agreed, and that had an exit for the president at that time, ending with the abolition of the executive presidency. So that should have happened. It's not that no one was willing to take that office. Right. Everybody was committed to that program being done. So now, unfortunately, it's delayed by more than 2 years now. So at this election, at least, I hope that will be sort of confirmed. That within a given time, 6 months might be too early, at least within the first year, that the executive presidency would be abolished.
But it will require a referendum.
Of course it will require.
Could that be done concurrently with, say, like a general? How would it work practically? Because
I think we need a
parliament as well, right?
We need a new constitution. There's no question about that.
Right.
So a constitution was made also during the last parliament. I saw the NPP manifesto. It says that the constitutional reform process that went on from 2015 to 2019 will be taken to its conclusion. Yeah. So they are given that commitment. So you don't have to start from scratch. A lot of that work was done. A draft was presented to Parliament by Mr. Wickramasinghe on the 16th of January 2019. So there's a draft available. Sajid Premadas, on the other hand, when there was an all-party conference called by Ranil Wickramasinghe in December 22, brought all of those documents that had been devised during that process and said, I'm committed to this process, and completing it. That was a process headed by Ranil Wickramasinghe himself. He was the chair of the steering committee, and he's the one who presented the draft bill to Parliament. So, I think all three main contenders are, have at least given the promise of doing that. So, by making a new constitution,
Three. The incumbent hasn't.
Well, incumbent. No, I'm saying he was the one who.
At that point.
That's 2019,
no more.
5 years ago.
I mean, in the sense, we haven't heard anything.
We haven't heard him say that.
Yeah,
we haven't heard him say
forgotten.
that. But what I'm saying is that he is the one who led that process during that time. He is the one who presented it in Parliament, right? It will be very difficult for him to disown it. It's possible, but that is where the citizens come in and say, well, it's your own document.
People are a power center.
Mr. Sumanthiran,
right?
Prior to being president, Ranil Wickramasinghe said publicly, if the Aragala is attacked, he is going to withdraw from the all-party conference.
That if others attack it, he can attack.
Yeah, that's exactly. So
good point. But okay, I mean, we understand the need for a constitution and all that. I mean, but the current climate, how much do you think has the electoral system contributed towards that? This crossing overs, the political horse trading that goes on. Don't you think we need some electoral reform as well as part of?
Electoral reform has been a big problem. Last time also we couldn't get through this new constitution because there was no consensus on the electoral process. There were three main issues. One was devolution, two was abolition of executive presidency, three was parliament system. It was on the parliamentary system there was no consensus. On the other two there was consensus. So, I don't regard the current parliamentary system as a problem at all. I think democracy-wise, it's a fairly good system. I mean, you can improve on it if you like, but that's a different...
It certainly helps the minorities, right? Having the proportional representation system.
Yes.
I think when we talked to the NPP, they said they're looking at a mixed system of proportional and national.
Yeah, we tried that mixed system in the local government elections. That has not been successful. No party was able to actually command working majority. Only in a very few councils they managed that. So that's a failure. I would say that's a failure.
But what about the nationalist though? Now, it doesn't serve its intended purpose, right?
That is true. That is true. Yeah.
And even the president who's there now wasn't appointed to the one seat granted to the UNP in
by
the
nationalists.
time. And so on.
Yeah.
So why has there not been public...
Isn't
No, there is
illegal?
No, the problem is that the constitution doesn't say what happens if no one is appointed.
So there's no...
Okay.
But you are supposed to appoint within 2 weeks?
Within 2 weeks, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there was a case which was dismissed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So what you said is the concentration of power in the executive presidency has undermined democracy in Sri Lanka. Abolishing it is not just a political reform, it's a necessary step towards restoring balance and accountability in our governance system. So we'll leave it there and move on to the next one. On representation and land rights. So finally, let's maybe put the election hat on. With upcoming elections representing both challenges and opportunities for the minority communities, I'm not just talking about the Tamil community. I mean, I think all minorities face challenges. We particularly work with the Malaya community. We've seen the issues they're having and so on. You have expressed reservations about the strategy of fielding a common candidate, right? I mean,
No, not just express reservation. I have opposed it tooth and nail. I still do.
Right. So, in your view, what would be the most effective political strategy for the Tamil community and for minorities right now to approach this election?
Up to now, there have been two main contenders for the post. Right? If you look at even post for the last three elections, there were two main contenders. And from the point of view of the Tamil community, particularly, 2015, the candidate we supported won. And there was significant changes that we brought about through that process. A lot of the land that was held by the military was released, several thousands of acres of lands were released, etc. The military presence was greatly reduced. A lot of movement was done on even accountability related issues. I talked about the co-sponsoring of the resolution in the UN. A new constitution was, almost produced. We couldn't take it over the line, but the draft was done. So, but now, if there are three main contenders, then our bargaining position becomes that much stronger.
Right.
So I have been arguing that when there is a numerically minority community who loses at every turn because they are numerically in the minority in a democracy, it is at these occasions that they actually can have a say, and that we mustn't lose those opportunities. We are not asking for anything unreasonable. We are not asking for anything more than any other community has in the country. We are only asking for equal citizenship rights. And because it is a democracy, and democracy works on the votes of the majority, we are on the losing side all of the time. So at times like this, we can put up a bargain hard.
So what specific things would you look for from the parties? Like what would you want them to have addressed?
Whatever they have agreed in the past,
they have to stick to.
They must commit to implementing.
Right.
So devolution of power is crucial for that. So that even though we are numerically smaller in the whole of the country, in certain parts of the country we are the majority.
Yeah.
And at least in those parts, then our wishes can be given effect over certain subjects and functions. That's all. What cannot be done in the periphery must necessarily be done in the center will remain in the center.
Right.
But day-to-day lives, with regard to decisions of those areas, they can decide for themselves rather than Colombo decides for them.
Right. I think in the past there's always been a Tamil common candidate, hasn't there? I think once.
No, there was one Mr. Sivajalingam who contests.
Mr. Gajapunambalam's father.
No, father
contested.
contested.
I think he was the only one to win a district as a presidential candidate, if I'm not mistaken, in one particular election.
Jaffna district, but he lost the northern province to Kobe Gadua.
Right. That's right.
He is the only one who got over 100,000 votes. Yeah. Mrs. Vajalingam has been contesting in recent times. I think last time he got less than 10,000 votes. So as a community, we don't look at it favorably. But what has happened is that the frustration of being let down by every person who comes to office has driven them to one party calls for a boycott.
Yeah.
And now, while that is calling for a boycott, a few others have said, now vote for this person. See, they are not being far-sighted. They are not thinking of, okay, what the next day? What can they do the next day after the election? There's nothing.
Yeah.
But it is this sense of absolute frustration that they're being let down at every turn that has caused them to basically stay out of this whole process, either by boycott or by wasting your vote by putting it to somebody who is of no consequence.
Yeah, that just gives an advantage to the people
of
who
course,
don't
yeah,
need
so
the majority.
That's right. This is an emotional sort of reaction. Yeah. So people like us have been telling them, think rationally. Now calm down. Be scheming, right? Bargain hard,
right,
and so on.
Right.
So can I ask a question?
Yes.
How will they react this time, sir?
Well, a lot depends on what our party, that's the ITAK, will say. We haven't made a call. That particular candidate is from our party. He is a Central Working Committee member. We have taken disciplinary action against him.
Okay.
We have called for his explanation.
The one who's expressed support to on the candidates. No?
The candidate himself.
Oh, he's the candidate.
Yeah,
How is from ITAK?
So we have called for his explanation, and we have banned him from all our meetings.
Right.
And at the last meeting, we advised all our members from joining his campaign. So we've given a clear signal to our people not to support it. But I think we should expressly say not to support him. As to who we should support, we haven't taken a decision as yet.
I also met an MPP member who had travelled Jaffna and Eastern Province both. What he told me was that Tamil people only want simply to have their own language, work in their language. That's all what they want.
That's a very simplistic idea of understanding what the Tamil person wants. That is another big problem here, that they don't quite understand. It's more that it's a sense of belonging, and if you have to have a sense of belonging, you must be able to have an impact in the workings of the country. You can't be told, okay, you'll get your letters in Tamil, now be satisfied with that.
Yeah. Has this Urumia program?
Yes, that's been a boon.
Yeah.
So the incumbent might get some votes as a result.
As a result
yeah.
of that.
That was the reason for it, right?
Of course, that's the reason for it. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, politics sort of creeps into pretty much everything. So your what you said about this in the past is the Tamil community must not be reduced to mere vote banks. Our demands for justice, equality, and rights must be at the forefront of any electoral strategy. So that electoral strategy, that means you want the main parties to have certain things in their manifestos, in their policies that actually supports the communities, right? Because I think we would love to see a country where the parties are not divided by race.
That is my view as well. But if a community or two communities, because of their inferior numbers, are disadvantaged and have to suffer some kind of discrimination, then naturally there will be a voice coming from that community.
From historical context, we understand the need for it, absolutely. Because obviously, things that have happened as disenfranchised minorities and then...
So, but if we get to the point of treating everyone equally, and when I say equally, it's not just individuals equally, but also groups, their identities, their cultures, their language, all of that, their access to governance, use of powers and all of that, then there will be no necessity for ethnic or language-based political parties.
For that, we have to achieve equity, equality, and all of that. I think that's it.
Yeah, we are 3 weeks to the presidential election. When don't you think your party's decision it's important to come out soon?
We've always had the practice of announcing at the last moment.
All right. Okay.
So
to have the most impact, is it? So it's the freshest in people's minds.
No, we have done that in the past for a particular reason which is not valid this time.
Yeah.
We've done that in the past for the reason that we feared that if we supported a candidate, that will have reaction in the south, and hardline Sinhala nationalists will say that that candidate has had a secret deal with us and carry on a campaign, and that candidate will lose.
So it'll be damaging to a certain extent.
Okay. But I don't think that is valid anymore.
Right.
Because there is no sort of racist undertones this time, at least from the main candidates. So I don't think that needs to be a fear this time round.
Right.
This time round, it's a genuine dilemma. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, right.
I hope it's a dilemma between two parties.
Well, so if you know, but the ground reality, right? I mean, the president's campaign is based on a certain amount of like stability and things like that, right? The economy has been revived. Fact is, people are paying 3 times more for essentials, commodities and things like that. 7 million more people in poverty. How has the economic situation?
Now that is of no concern to the people in the north and east.
Not a concern.
That's not a concern.
The
corruption is
stability or the...
No, the stability also is not too much of a concern. The rising prices, I mean, there are poor communities, but they have their own coping system. Right? There is a remittance economy. Right? So when the dollar went up, they were happy because they were getting more for their dollar.
Because,
right? Yeah. So people here don't understand how sometimes the opposite actually happens there when something else happens here.
In tourism benefited because we were getting more for the dollar.
Right. So there are those factors. Now, I mean, just a general sort of survey of the land there. A lot of people are quite happy to have Mr. Wickramasinghe re-elected because it's a known phase. He publicly stood for federalism in 2005, and we are the ones who got him defeated.
Right.
We must make amends for that now.
The guilty conscience.
Yeah, all that and various things like that. Right. Some say we last time we voted 80-83% for Sajid Premadasa. Why don't we still do that? Yeah. There are others who say, well, we want a change, voting for these two main parties not delivered anything. Let's go radical and vote for AKD. Yeah. So, when you have a community that is like divided in this way, the last 3 elections we didn't see that. You put up a Rajapaksa, everybody, I mean, they even voted for Sarath Fonseca.
Yeah. No.
Yeah,
yes, full scale. They all voted for Sarath Fonseca.
Because it was a vote against
Rajapaksa. Right.
Which is what?
This time, unfortunately, there is no Rajapaksa of stature. Yeah, well, there is a Rajapaksa.
There's two actually. There's two now.
Well, there is, but he is of not much consequence. So that drive is not there. To keep the Rajapaksa out, drive is not there.
Right.
So it's that's why I said it's a dilemma.
So if you were to talk to the parties, what would you tell them about what is important to the people in the north and east?
Yeah, so we need to give our people some direction, and they're looking, because it's a dilemma. They are also looking to us.
Yeah.
And I had a meeting
we
in my
friends who look to us. So
I know. So I just called for a meeting in Jaffna Sunday when I was there in my house, and 60 people turned up.
Yeah.
Right? And each was saying these different things. They were supporting one or the other of the 3 people.
Yeah.
And and I said, well, it seems like equally divided, whatever. They said, no, this is our view, but you tell us, and we'll go that way.
Right.
So I told them, I'm also in my mind divided.
Right.
See?
Yeah.
So don't they associate Ranil at all with the Rajapaksas?
They do. So that's one minus. But more than the Rajapaksas, they don't like him being with Pillayan, with Douglas. The local issues are...
Issues also there. Yeah. Well, I mean, this election is an acid test for the whole country.
Yeah.
We'll get a lot of information about people's thinking, especially after the Aragala. Because we were of the mindset that, okay, this was an awakening, that people will look at outcomes rather than looking at just supporting people for the sake of, because that's what they've always done, or vote bank politics and so on. And it's interesting to have a discussion about politics when you can have it,
So now this question about Rajapaksas and Ranil, you see, what has it cost the people in the north and east that he has been with the Rajapaksas? Nothing. They haven't suffered anything so far.
So it's fairly transactional in that way.
Yeah.
It's fairly transactional in that way.
So they are thinking maybe, well, he hasn't done any harm to us in the past.
I mean, I can understand in his, historically why that cynicism would come, right?
Yeah.
Because you suffered under so many administrations.
So I've raised this issue about corruption, and they say, let the South fix it. Why are we getting worried about that?
Right. Okay. All right. Good. I mean, great insights, right? I mean, because we never think of that in those terms, right? But thank you so much for your time.
I have a question.
Go ahead. Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
After you go first.
Yeah, we are just reaching an hour now.
That's all right, yeah.
Just a quick question. I was listening to Satana yesterday.
Yeah.
Question was asked from NPP, how they are going, if they win, how they are going to have that transitional period. Because they have only 3 people. So what they said was, they are going to have the elections immediately, and they are going to, President can remove the cabinet, have the right to remove the cabinet, and they will appoint secretaries to the 25 ministries that they want.
Yeah.
Can the President remove the cabinet?
President can now. Yeah.
He can.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's that secretary?
So they have a plausible roadmap.
Yeah.
And the
If they
secretary
do come
is
into
the chief
power.
executive officer.
Yeah, secretaries are anyway appointed by the President. So.
Yeah,
They
actually,
will
most
appoint,
countries, the secretaries that run the ministry.
Yes, they will appoint, because they are talking.
25 ministries, yeah.
They will have.
Yeah.
Right, so that's a plausible.
Yeah. They'll do that and dissolve Parliament.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my question is, now with this provincial council, local government elections, with that case saying that he was in default for not having held it, can we have the general election before that, or does that have to happen before? Can they be done together concurrently?
If the Parliament
anyone coming in will dissolve Parliament, right?
If the Parliament is dissolved, constitutionally, a general election has to be held within 66 days of the dissolution of Parliament. So that is mandated by the Constitution. You can't change that.
Okay.
The other 2 elections can be. That is why Supreme Court also said, have it at the earliest, having regard to other elections that you need to hold under the law.
Because that has been a bit of a...
So now my private member's bill to hold the provincial council elections has now come to the final stage. We had this first reading, then it went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court approved it with some changes. I went through the second reading is done, committee stage is passed. On the third, it will be taken up for third reading, which is a final. So once that passes, then the provincial council elections also have to be held by the Election Commission.
Right.
But timing, if Parliament is dissolved, then they have to hold the parliamentary elections first.
So it's a bit tricky.
Yeah.
Okay. Clear?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Mr. Madhavan, thank you so much. Any other questions? Yeah, we've gone well over an hour, so you've been very generous with your time. And we are thankful that you actually came. Today
My pleasure.
To work around the timings and so on. So generally we end the discussion with a quote that Leisha finds that is relevant to the discussion. She has a couple this week.
Okay, so I got 2. Good governance never depends upon laws, but upon the personal qualities of those who govern. The machinery of government is always subordinate to the will of those who administer that machinery. The most important element of government, therefore, is the method of choosing its leaders.
And this is by Frank Herbert, right?
Yeah.
So he's the guy who wrote Dune.
Yes,
Is
I
this
know.
from the book?
No, it's not.
Because,
I googled.
Yeah, because the way they choose leaders in his books is like dynastic. Like it's by like combat and stuff like that.
The second one is accountability is a cornerstone of good governance. It ensures that power serves the people and not the other way around.
Thank you, Lisha. Thank you so much. Just a quick reminder to everyone that, I mean, no matter who is elected, we will continue to be in the fight because we are in the fight for good governance, law and order, equal application of the law, justice, accountability, transparency, and system change, which were all demands of Aragale, and we're a group that, rose up during that whole time. Sometimes when we fight for these things, we have to go directly against the administration because, so when we fight against the administration, to people, it looks like we're fighting for somebody.
Yeah.
It's not. We're fighting for outcomes. I think it's very important for us to mention this, right? So I think with that we can wrap it up. Mr. Sumanthiran, anything you want to
we should add into that, after the election,
Hold the mic.
sorry, we should add to remove the executive presidency.
Well, that's part of the system change, right?
That's part of our system change.
It's part of our system change. So we have the bigger goal, we have the bigger list, but these are the main goals that we've been fighting for. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Is there anything you would like to add?
No, just that my hope is that what started 2 years ago, a citizens' movement for change has been delayed for various reasons, and now with an opportunity for the citizens to cast their vote, my hope is that that will actually realize the dreams of the citizens for system change.
Right. We hope so. We hope so too. I mean, we know that there are no perfect parties,
yes, of course,
perfect candidates. But at least these things that we read out, we know where we are not going to get them from. So I mean, what I've been telling people is just vote by elimination, eliminate like the worst, and then see what's left. And if you want to close.
But there's another quote.
Please.
Yeah.
When we choose the lesser of the evils, we quickly forget that it was an evil that we chose.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. but sadly, that's our political sort of.
So we must continue to remember that it was still an evil that we chose.
We chose, absolutely. Sadly, that's our political reality. Maybe one day we can, have candidates that we can be proud of. That we can say, okay, you know what, this is where we need to be. So thank you so much. We will. That's it for day 305 at Good Governance AI. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back on our street on Sunday for day 306, and that's a wrap from us tonight from the roundtable discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.